The bitter January wind sliced through my thin jacket as I hunched my shoulders against the cold, hurrying home after my night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. 3 years as an ER nurse had taught me to treasure these quiet moments between chaos. My apartment waited 5 blocks away, a shoebox with peeling paint and a temperamental heater, but it was mine, paid for with double shifts and instant ramen dinners. The streets of North End Boston were deserted at 2 a.m., my footsteps echoing against brick buildings that loomed like sentinels in the darkness. I clutched my pepper spray tighter, a gift from my father before I moved here. "Just in case," he'd said, the worry lines deepening around his eyes. I'd laughed then. Now, I understood. A few stray snowflakes drifted down, catching in my eyelashes. I blinked them away, distracted by the burning ache in my feet. 12 hours standing had left my arches screaming. Just 4 more blocks. The sound registered before my conscious mind could process it, a sharp crack that echoed off the buildings. Gunshot. My body froze, instinct warring between flight and the strange stillness that sometimes overcomes prey animals. 3 more shots followed. Rapid fire from the alley ahead. I should run. Call 911. Hide. Any of these would be the rational response. Instead, I moved forward, my training overriding self-preservation. Someone could be bleeding out. Brain tissue degrades after 4 minutes without oxygen. Golden hour. The medical facts flashed through my mind, pushing me toward the mouth of the alley rather than away. "Hello?" My voice sounded small against the vastness of the night. "Is anyone hurt?" The alley reeked of garbage and something metallic. Blood. My phone's flashlight illuminated a scene from a nightmare. 2 bodies sprawled face down on the wet pavement, dark liquid pooling beneath them, and a third man, leaning heavily against the brick wall, one hand pressed to his side. His head snapped up at my approach, eyes glittering in the darkness like those of a cornered animal. "Stay back." His voice was soft, but carried an unmistakable command. Not the panicked tone of a victim, but something else entirely. I should have listened. Something about him radiated danger. The way he held himself despite the wound, the expensive cut of his coat now torn and blood-soaked, the calculation behind his gaze as he assessed me. But I'd seen too many people die because help came too late. "I'm a nurse," I said, approaching slowly, hands visible. "Let me help you." A sleek black car screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley, its headlights catching us in their glare. The wounded man straightened, grimacing. His face emerged from shadow, striking rather than conventionally handsome, with sharp cheekbones and dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His jawline was covered in stubble, and a thin scar bisected his left eyebrow. Young, probably early 30s, but with eyes that had seen too much. "Boss!" A large man erupted from the passenger seat, gun already drawn. His gaze landed on me, and the barrel swung in my direction. "Who the fuck is she?" The wounded man, the boss, made a subtle gesture with 2 fingers. "Lower your weapon, Vince. She's a nurse." The gun didn't waver. She saw everything. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. I was going to die in a filthy alley, because I couldn't mind my own business. I said, "Lower it." The wounded man's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than a shout. "Now!" The gun lowered reluctantly. I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. "Sir, you need a hospital." I tried to keep my voice steady, professional. "That wound... No hospitals." He pushed himself off the wall, wavering slightly before regaining his composure. "But I could use your expertise, privately." It wasn't a request. The large man, Vince, moved behind me, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel his presence, blocking any retreat. "I have a first aid kit at my apartment," I heard myself say, the words tumbling out before I could consider their implications. "It's not far." A ghost of a smile touched the wounded man's lips. Perfect. The next 20 minutes passed in a surreal blur. I found myself sandwiched between 2 silent men in the back of a car that cost more than I'd make in 10 years. The leather seats smelled new and expensive, a jarring contrast to the copper scent of blood that filled the confined space. The wounded man kept pressure on his side, his breathing controlled, giving no indication of pain except for the tightness around his eyes. I should be terrified. Instead, my mind cataloged his symptoms with clinical detachment. Pale skin, controlled breathing to minimize pain, steady pressure on the wound. No visible shock yet, but blood loss would eventually take its toll. "Turn left here," I directed the driver as we approached my street, the brick building with the fire escape. As the car pulled to the curb, I finally found my voice again. "Who are you people?" The wounded man turned those dark eyes on me. "Someone who now owes you a debt, Miss..." "Emma," I supplied automatically. "Emma Sullivan. Emma." He rolled my name in his mouth like he was tasting it. "I'm Nikolai, and I don't forget those who help me." My apartment felt smaller than ever with 3 men inside it. I directed Nikolai to my bathroom, where the light was best. He shrugged off his coat with a controlled wince, then began unbuttoning his shirt. The fabric, once white, was now crimson along his left side. "Your men," I said, washing my hands thoroughly, falling back on procedure to keep panic at bay. "The ones in the alley, not your concern." Nikolai sat on the edge of my bathtub, his torso now bare. Despite the situation, I couldn't help noticing the lean muscle beneath tanned skin, marred by a patchwork of old scars. The newest addition was an angry furrow along his ribs where a bullet had grazed him. "You're lucky," I said, examining the wound. "It's not deep. No organ damage." "I'm always lucky." Something in his tone made me look up, finding his eyes fixed intently on my face, until tonight. Then I became fortunate. My cheeks warmed under his scrutiny. I focused on cleaning the wound, hyper-aware of how my fingers brushed against his skin. Vince loomed in the doorway, watchful, while the driver kept guard in my living room. "This will hurt," I warned, preparing to disinfect the wound. Nikolai didn't flinch as the antiseptic made contact. "I've had worse. I can tell." My eyes traced the map of violence written across his body. Knife wounds, burn marks, another bullet scar on his shoulder. "Are you always this observant, Emma Sullivan?" "Professional hazard," I replied, beginning to stitch the wound. My fingers worked automatically, muscle memory from countless procedures. Though I usually work on patients who tell me how they got injured. His lips quirked upward. "Would you believe I fell while renovating my kitchen?" "No." "Smart girl." His eyes never left my face as I worked. "Most people would have run when they heard gunshots. Most people haven't taken an oath to help others." The final stitch went in, neat and precise. I covered the wound with gauze and surgical tape. "Admirable," he murmured. "Dangerous, but admirable." My small first aid kit, assembled from hospital supplies I'd slowly collected, was now spread across my bathroom counter. As I cleaned up, Nikolai stood, testing his mobility with careful movements. "You should rest," I advised. "No strenuous activity for at least a week. The wound needs to be kept clean, and I know the drill." He buttoned a fresh shirt that Vince had brought from the car. "This isn't my first bullet wound." That statement should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a strange curiosity. "Who are you, really?" Nikolai considered me for a long moment, as if debating how much to reveal. "Someone with resources and enemies. Someone who can be a powerful friend. Or enemy," I ventured. His smile was razor-sharp. "You'll never have to find out." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a sleek business card, blank except for a phone number embossed in silver. "If you ever need anything at all, call this number." I took the card, our fingers brushing. "I don't need anything. Everyone needs something, Emma." He turned to leave, then paused in my hallway. "My driver will remain outside tonight, for your protection." "That's not necessary." "It is." His tone brooked no argument. "You've seen my face. There could be repercussions." The implications hung in the air between us. I swallowed hard. "For how long?" "Until I'm certain you're safe." He reached out, his fingers ghosting along my cheek in a touch so light I might have imagined it. "Thank you for your assistance tonight, Emma Sullivan. We'll meet again soon." After they left, I double-locked my door with shaking hands. The reality of what had happened hit me all at once. I'd invited dangerous men into my home. I'd treated what was clearly a gunshot wound without reporting it. I'd become entangled in something dark and violent. Sleep evaded me that night. I sat by my window, watching the black car parked across the street until dawn painted the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Only then did I drift into an uneasy slumber, Nikolai's final words echoing in my dreams. "We'll meet again soon." I woke to my phone's insistent buzz. Groggily, I checked the time. 2 p.m. I'd slept through my morning alarm, missing my shift at the hospital for the first time in 3 years. Panic shot through me as I scrolled through missed calls from the charge nurse. I was calling back when a knock at my door froze my finger above the screen. Through the peephole, I saw an unfamiliar man in a crisp black suit, holding a small package. "Ms. Sullivan?" he called through the door. Delivery from Mr. Volkov, Nikolai Volkov. The name settled in my mind like a key finding its lock. I opened the door cautiously, chain still in place. "What is it?" "A gift." He extended the package, a sleek black box tied with silver ribbon. "And an invitation for dinner tonight. A car will collect you at 8. I didn't agree to dinner. The man's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Volkov said you might say that. He also said to remind you that you missed work today, and he's taken the liberty of speaking with your supervisor. Your shifts are covered for the week. Paid leave." My mouth fell open. He did what? 8 o'clock, Ms. Sullivan. He placed the box in my reluctant hands and retreated down the hallway. Inside the box lay a dress of midnight blue silk that would certainly cost several months of my salary, along with a handwritten note, a small token of appreciation. "I look forward to thanking you properly tonight. NV." As I set the note down, movement outside my window caught my attention. I parted the curtains and froze, my breath catching in my throat. The street below, normally busy with commuters at this hour, was lined with black cars. Not one or two, but dozens stretching in both directions as far as I could see. Men in dark suits stood beside each vehicle, their posture alert, watching my building. A show of force, a message, a claim. In that moment, I realized that by saving Nikolai Volkov's life, I may have surrendered my own. The dress fit as if it had been tailored specifically for my body, the silk cool and weightless against my skin. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing myself. The woman who gazed back had my features but seemed like a stranger. Vulnerable, yet somehow transformed. The midnight blue fabric shimmered with each breath, the neckline modest but elegant, the hem falling just below my knees. I hadn't planned to wear it. Had spent hours pacing my apartment, alternating between righteous anger at Nikolai's presumption and gut-churning fear about what refusing him might mean. The fleet of black cars remained outside, a silent reminder of his reach. Twice I'd picked up my phone to call the police, and twice I'd set it down again. What would I say? That I'd treated a gunshot wound without reporting it? That a man I'd saved had sent me a dress? In the end, curiosity won out over caution. I wanted answers. At precisely 8 o'clock, another knock came at my door. A different man this time, older, with silver at his temples and eyes that had seen too much. "Ms. Sullivan," he said with a slight bow of his head. "I'm Anton. Mr. Volkov sent me personally to escort you." The hallway of my building was lined with men in dark suits, spaced evenly like sentinels. They stood at attention as I passed, eyes respectfully averted but postures alert, a show of protection or control. Outside, one car stood apart from the others, a Rolls-Royce Phantom with darkened windows that gleamed under the streetlights. Anton opened the rear door, and I slid into buttery leather seats, my heart thundering against my ribs. "Where are we going?" I asked, as Anton took his place in the driver's seat. "Mr. Volkov's private residence in Beacon Hill," he replied, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "It's not far." The car glided through Boston's evening traffic, eventually turning onto narrower streets lined with historic brownstones. We stopped before an imposing townhouse with a discreet security presence. Men positioned strategically around the perimeter, their sharp gazes sweeping the street continuously. Anton led me to a door of dark mahogany, which opened before he could knock. A woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun inclined her head. "Ms. Sullivan, welcome to Mr. Volkov's home. I'm Mrs. Petrov, the housekeeper." Her accent was Eastern European, her manner efficient but not unfriendly. "Please follow me." The interior took my breath away. Soaring ceilings, artwork that belonged in museums, furnishings that whispered old money and refined taste. Nothing ostentatious, just quiet luxury that made my apartment feel even shabbier in retrospect. Mrs. Petrov led me through the house to a glass-enclosed courtyard garden. A surprising oasis in the midst of the city, tropical plants created a lush paradise despite the January chill outside, the air warm and fragrant with exotic blooms. A table was set for two, candles flickering in the center. And there he stood, Nikolai Volkov, looking nothing like the wounded man I'd stitched up just 24 hours ago. In a tailored black suit that accentuated his broad shoulders and lean waist, he emanated power and control. His dark hair was neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaven. Only the intensity of his gaze remained unchanged, those obsidian eyes locking onto mine the moment I entered. Emma, he spoke my name like a claim, crossing to me in long strides. He took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles as he raised it to his lips. You look beautiful. Heat crawled up my neck. The dress was unnecessary, but appreciated, I hope. His eyes traveled over me, missing nothing. It suits you. The cars outside my apartment were also unnecessary, I said, reclaiming my hand. All 100 of them. A slight smile touched his lips. 97, actually. An abundance of caution. For whose protection? Mine or yours? His expression sobered. Both. He gestured to the table. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Wine was poured. A vintage I couldn't begin to identify, but that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A server appeared with the first course, his movements practiced and silent. Throughout, Nikolai's eyes rarely left my face. I imagine you have questions, he said finally, after I'd picked at my appetizer. Dozens. I set down my fork, starting with why you've gone to all this trouble for a stranger who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The right place, he corrected. And I'm not in the habit of leaving debts unpaid. Is that what this is? Settling a debt? His head tilted slightly, studying me. You saved my life, Emma. There are men who would have killed you for witnessing what you did. Instead, I chose to protect you. By putting me under surveillance? By interfering with my job? By ensuring your safety while certain matters are resolved? He leaned forward, his presence suddenly filling the space between us. The men who attacked me last night have associates. They would think nothing of using you to get to me. A chill ran through me despite the greenhouse warmth. Who are they? Who are you? Nikolai took a measured sip of his wine. I'm a businessman with diverse interests. Import, export, real estate, construction. And the guns? The men watching my apartment? The fact that you speak to my supervisor and suddenly I have paid leave? I shook my head. Don't insult my intelligence, something like approval flashed in his eyes. Most would accept the convenient lie. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're not. He set down his glass. My family has operated in Boston for 3 generations. We protect our interests and our territory. Sometimes that requires enforcement. You're with the Russian mob, I said flatly, the pieces clicking into place. Nikolai didn't flinch at the accusation. I prefer organization, more accurate. The reality of my situation hit me with stunning clarity. I'd saved the life of a Mafia boss. I'd stitched him up in my bathroom. I'd seen his face, knew his name, could identify him. Are you going to kill me? The question slipped out, bare and honest. Shock registered on his face, quickly replaced by something darker. Is that what you think of me? I don't know you, I whispered. He reached across the table, his hand capturing mine before I could withdraw. His grip was gentle but inescapable, his skin warm against my own. You know enough, he said. You know I keep my word. You know I repay my debts, and now you know that I have no intention of harming you. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending unwanted shivers up my arm. Quite the opposite. I pulled my hand away. What does that mean? The server appeared with our main course, temporarily halting the conversation. When we were alone again, Nikolai continued as if there had been no interruption. It means you're under my protection now. It means no harm will come to you. Not from my enemies. Not from anyone. For how long? I demanded. For as long as necessary. I can't live with cars parked outside my apartment and men following me everywhere. Nikolai considered this, cutting into his steak with precise movements. Would you prefer alternative arrangements? I'd prefer my normal life back. That's no longer possible, Emma. His tone was gentle but final. You stepped into my world the moment you entered that alley. The only question now is how we proceed. Anger flared in my chest, hot and sudden. You don't get to decide that for me. No? His eyebrow arched. Tell me, what would happen if I withdrew my men tonight? If I left you unprotected? He leaned forward again, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. The people who want me dead wouldn't hesitate to use you. They would take you, hurt you, all to get to me. The clinical part of my brain understood the logic. The rest of me rebelled against the trap I'd unwittingly walked into. So I'm just supposed to accept being a prisoner? Having my life controlled by a man I barely know? Not a prisoner, Nikolai corrected. A valuable asset to be protected. A possession, I translated. Something flashed in his eyes. Possessiveness, desire, anger. I couldn't tell which, if that's how you choose to see it. We ate in tense silence for several minutes. The only sounds the gentle bubbling of the courtyard fountain and the clink of silverware against fine china. When Nikolai spoke again, his tone had softened. Tell me about yourself, Emma Sullivan. How does an ER nurse end up alone in Boston? The abrupt change of subject threw me. I'm not alone. I have colleagues, friends, none who've checked on you today, he observed. No family calling to see why you missed work. The accuracy of his assessment stung. Have you been monitoring my phone too? He didn't deny it. Your parents? I sighed, the fight temporarily leaving me. My father died 2 years ago, cancer. My mother remarried and moved to Arizona. Siblings? A younger brother in Seattle. We talk on holidays. Nikolai nodded, absorbing this information. You're alone in the world, like me. The comparison startled me. You, with your army of men and all. I gestured around at the opulent surroundings. Employees, subordinates, not family. Something vulnerable flickered across his face. So quickly I might have imagined it. My parents were killed when I was 16. A rival organization. My uncle raised me to take over the family business. Despite myself, sympathy stirred in my chest. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. His expression closed again, that momentary glimpse of humanity tucked safely away. The point is, I understand isolation. The difference is that I've chosen it. You haven't. What makes you think I haven't chosen it? His smile was knowing. People who choose isolation don't run toward gunshots to help strangers. The observation hit uncomfortably close to home. I'd spent years building walls, focusing on work, keeping relationships superficial, yet I still couldn't walk away from someone in pain. What do you want from me, Nikolai? I asked finally, exhaustion creeping into my voice. Really? He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Your trust, for a start. You haven't earned it. Not yet, he acknowledged. But I will. The rest of dinner passed in a strange detente. Nikolai steered the conversation to safer topics. My work at the hospital, his travels around the world, books we'd both read. Despite everything, I found myself reluctantly engaged. He was intelligent, well-read, with a dry wit that occasionally surprised a laugh from me. In another context, I might have enjoyed his company. After dessert, he led me through the house to a room that had been converted into a private gallery. Paintings lined the walls, mostly Russian artists I didn't recognize, their work vibrant and emotionally charged. My one indulgence, Nikolai said, watching me examine a particularly striking landscape. Art speaks truths that words cannot. They're beautiful, I admitted. I wouldn't have expected. A criminal to appreciate beauty? His tone held no offense, only mild amusement. I don't know what I expected, I replied honestly. He moved closer, his presence a tangible force beside me. And now? I turned to face him, suddenly aware of how alone we were. The rest of the house seemed distant, the sounds muffled. Now I have more questions than answers. Ask me, he said simply. What happens tomorrow? And the day after that? I can't live with guards forever. No. he agreed. But until I eliminate the threat, you need protection. He hesitated, then continued. I have a proposition. Wariness crept back into my posture. What kind of proposition? Stay here, he said. I have a separate guest wing with complete privacy. You'd be safer here than in your apartment. And you wouldn't feel so constrained. Move in with you? I stared at him, incredulous. A man I just met? A criminal? A man who owes you his life, he corrected, who has the resources to protect you properly. And what would you expect in return? My voice hardened. What's the price for this protection? Anger flashed across his features, genuine and fierce. I'm not asking for payment, Emma. I'm trying to keep you alive. Why do you care? I challenged. Why not just have one of your men watch my apartment from a distance? Why all this? I gestured around us, at the dinner, the dress, the attention he'd shown me. Nikolai stepped closer, closing the distance between us until I could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, with notes of cedar and spice. His hand came up to touch my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with surprising gentleness. Because you're extraordinary, he said quietly. You walked into an alley where most would fear to tread. You faced armed men without flinching. You treated my wound without question. And you've sat across from me tonight, unintimidated, demanding truth. His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. Do you know how rare that is in my world? To find someone authentic, someone uncorrupted. My heart hammered against my ribs, my body hyper-aware of his proximity. I'm just a nurse who made a stupid decision. You're much more than that. His voice dropped lower, intimate, and I intend to discover exactly how much more. The air between us thickened with unspoken tension. I should step back, should reject his offer outright, should demand to be taken home. Instead, I found myself asking, how long? 2 weeks, he said. By then, I will have dealt with the threat. And if I say no, his hand dropped from my face, leaving a ghost of warmth behind. Then Anton will take you home, and the cars will remain outside your building. Your choice? Choice. A word that implied freedom I wasn't sure I still possessed. I need time to think, I said finally. Nikolai nodded, a small victory conceded. Of course. But not too much time, Emma. The threat remains very real. As if to punctuate his warning, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He checked it, his expression hardening as he read the message. Is something wrong? I asked. Nothing for you to concern yourself with. He tucked the phone away, but the relaxed demeanor from dinner had vanished, replaced by the dangerous man I'd glimpsed in the alley. It's getting late. Anton will take you home, just like that. The abrupt dismissal caught me off guard. Nikolai's smile didn't reach his eyes. Business calls, I'm afraid, but we'll continue this conversation tomorrow. He took my hand again, pressing something cool and metallic into my palm. Take this. I opened my hand to find a small silver key. What's this for? The guest wing, he said simply. Should you decide to accept my offer. Anton appeared silently in the doorway, summoned by some invisible signal. Nikolai raised my hand to his lips once more, his eyes never leaving mine. Think carefully, Emma Sullivan, he murmured against my skin. Your life has changed. The only question is whether you'll embrace that change or fight it. As Anton drove me home through darkened streets, the silver key burned in my clutched hand like a question with no easy answer. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, the silver key on my nightstand catching moonlight from my window, a constant reminder of the choice before me. Around 3 a.m., I gave up and moved to my living room, pulling back the corner of my curtain to peer outside. The black cars remained, sentinels in the darkness. One of Nikolai's men stood on the sidewalk below, his breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. Our eyes met briefly before I let the curtain fall back into place. 2 weeks in Nikolai Volkov's home versus 2 weeks under constant surveillance. Neither option appealed, but at least in his home, I'd have space to breathe, to think, to plan my next move, and perhaps, if I was honest with myself, to understand the enigmatic man who'd turned my life upside down. Dawn broke with gray light filtering through my windows when my decision crystallized. I would go, but on my terms. I wouldn't be a prisoner, nor a possession. I packed methodically, clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the few family photos I kept. Last, I tucked my hospital ID and nursing license into my bag. If Nikolai thought I would sit idle for 2 weeks, he was mistaken. I had just finished when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Have you decided?" N. The presumption irritated me. I typed back, "Yes, but I have conditions." The reply came immediately. I expected nothing less. "Anton will arrive at 10. We'll discuss your terms then." At precisely 10 a.m., a knock came at my door. Anton stood in the hallway, his posture formal but his eyes kind. "Ms. Sullivan," he greeted me with a slight nod. "Mr. Volkov sends his apologies that he couldn't come personally. An urgent matter required his attention." I hoisted my duffel bag onto my shoulder. "It's fine. I'm ready." Anton relieved me of my bag despite my protest and led me outside where the Rolls-Royce waited. The men stationed around my building watched our departure with impassive faces. "Mr. Volkov mentioned you have conditions," Anton said as we drove, his eyes finding mine in the rearview mirror. "Yes," I squared my shoulders. "First, I want to continue working, not at the hospital. I understand that might be complicated now, but my skills shouldn't go to waste. Second, I need freedom to come and go, with reasonable security measures. Third, this arrangement ends in exactly 2 weeks, regardless of whether Nikolai has handled the threat." Anton's expression revealed nothing. "I will convey your terms to Mr. Volkov." The journey to Beacon Hill seemed shorter in daylight. The townhouse looked different too, less imposing, more elegant against the clear blue January sky. Mrs. Petrov met us at the door, her severe expression softening slightly at the sight of me. "Welcome back, Ms. Sullivan," she said. "I'll show you to the guest wing." The guest wing turned out to be an entire floor of the house, accessed through a private staircase. It consisted of a master bedroom with an ensuite bathroom larger than my entire apartment, a sitting room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and even a small kitchenette. "Mr. Volkov thought you might appreciate your own space," Mrs. Petrov explained, watching me take in the luxurious surroundings. "The key he gave you unlocks the private entrance on the side of the house. You may come and go as you please, though Mr. Volkov requests that you inform security of your movements for safety purposes." I ran my fingers along the spines of books that filled the shelves: classics, modern fiction, medical texts, and histories. "Did he do all this overnight?" Mrs. Petrov's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Mr. Volkov can be determined when he wants something." The implication hung in the air between us. I turned away, busying myself with unpacking to hide the flush creeping up my neck. "Mr. Volkov will join you for dinner at 7, she continued. "Until then, please make yourself comfortable. The house is at your disposal, though I would advise avoiding the East Wing. That's where business is conducted." After she left, I explored my new temporary home, marveling at the attention to detail. The bathroom was stocked with expensive toiletries and scents I favored. The refrigerator in the kitchenette held my preferred brand of yogurt and fresh fruit. Even the closet contained a selection of new clothes in my size, tags still attached, ranging from casual to formal. It was thoughtful and terrifying. How much did Nikolai know about me? How long had he been watching before our paths crossed in that alley? I spent the afternoon reading in the window seat of the sitting room, trying to ignore the growing tension in my shoulders as 7 o'clock approached. At 6:45, I changed into my own clothes, jeans and a simple blue sweater, deliberately avoiding the new garments Nikolai had provided. A soft knock came at my door precisely at 7. I opened it to find Nikolai standing there, looking more casual than I'd seen him before in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His eyes took in my appearance, lingering on my decision to wear my own clothes, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I see you've settled in," he said by way of greeting. "The space is lovely," I acknowledged, though excessive. I prefer to exceed expectations rather than merely meet them. He offered his arm. "Shall we? Dinner is ready in the courtyard." I hesitated before placing my hand lightly on his forearm. The wool of his sweater felt soft beneath my fingers, and I could sense the hard muscle underneath. "Anton mentioned my conditions to you?" He did. Nikolai led me down the staircase toward the glass-enclosed courtyard that had impressed me the night before. And I agree to all three, with some caveats. What caveats? I asked warily. We entered the courtyard, where the table had been set for two again, though less formally than the previous night. The space felt different in daylight, the tropical plants casting dappled shadows, a small fountain providing gentle background music. Nikolai pulled out my chair, waiting until I was seated before taking his own place. Regarding work, I have a proposition. My organization maintains a private medical clinic for our people and their families. They could use someone with your expertise. My eyebrows shot up in surprise. You want me to work for the mob? I want you to help people who need medical care but can't always access traditional hospitals, he corrected. Many are immigrants without proper documentation. Others have reasons to avoid questions. All are under my protection. It wasn't what I'd expected. I could consider it. Good. He nodded to a server who brought our first course, a light salad with walnuts and goat cheese. As for freedom of movement, you can come and go as you wish, but with security. At least 2 men will accompany you at all times. I frowned. That's hardly inconspicuous. They can be discreet, Nikolai countered, and it's non-negotiable. The men who tried to kill me would not hesitate to use you as leverage. Who are they? I asked, pushing my salad around my plate. These enemies of yours? Nikolai's expression darkened. A rival organization from Providence. They've been trying to move into Boston for months. 2 nights ago, they made their boldest move yet. The ambush in the alley. He nodded. They had inside information, knew exactly where I would be. His jaw tightened. The traitor has been dealt with, but the threat remains. I set down my fork. Dealt with? You don't want those details, Emma. His voice was gentle but firm, a reminder of exactly who I was dining with. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of unspoken realities between us. Finally, I voiced the question that had been plaguing me. Why me, Nikolai? Why all this attention? You could have had your men watch my apartment without all. I gestured around us. This. He set down his glass, studying me with those intense dark eyes. Do you believe in fate, Emma? The question caught me off guard. I believe in cause and effect. As do I. He leaned forward slightly, but sometimes effects seem disproportionate to their causes. You entered that alley. You saved my life. Those are the causes. But the effect... He paused, his gaze never leaving mine. The effect is that I haven't been able to think of anything but you since that moment. Heat rushed to my face. You don't know me. I know enough, he countered. I know you're compassionate enough to risk your life for a stranger. I know you're brave enough to stand your ground even when afraid. I know you're intelligent enough to understand exactly what situation you're in, yet principled enough to set conditions rather than simply comply. His voice dropped lower. I know your hands are steady under pressure and gentle when they need to be. I know your eyes change color depending on the light, sometimes gray, sometimes blue. My breath caught in my throat. The intensity of his attention was overwhelming, intoxicating in a way I wasn't prepared for. That's observation, not knowledge. Perhaps. His lips quirked in a half-smile. But I'd like the opportunity to gain the knowledge. The server returned to clear our plates and bring the main course, seared scallops with risotto. I used the interruption to gather my composure, unsettled by how Nikolai's words had affected me. And the third condition? I asked when we were alone again. 2 weeks? No extensions. Nikolai's expression grew serious. 2 weeks should be sufficient to neutralize the immediate threat, but your safety afterward cannot be guaranteed if you cut all ties with my organization. I'm not looking to join your organization, I said firmly. I'm not asking you to. He took a sip of his wine. But some level of ongoing protection would be prudent. We reached an impasse then, neither willing to concede further ground. Nikolai redirected the conversation to lighter topics, books from the shelf he thought I might enjoy, places in Boston he recommended visiting, with security, of course. Despite myself, I found the tension gradually easing from my shoulders. After dinner, he showed me more of the house, a music room with a grand piano, a library that made me catch my breath, a home theater with sumptuous leather seating. It was a beautiful prison, however gilded. Do you play? I asked, nodding toward the piano as we passed through the music room again. Poorly, Nikolai admitted with a rare self-deprecating smile. My mother insisted on lessons, but I lacked the patience. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys. Do you? A little. My father taught me. I sat at the bench, fingers finding the opening notes of a Chopin nocturne, muscle memory from childhood lessons taking over. I played hesitantly at first, then with more confidence as the familiar melody filled the room. When I finished, I looked up to find Nikolai watching me with an unguarded expression, something like wonder in his eyes. You continue to surprise me, Emma Sullivan, he said softly. Good, I replied. I'd hate to be predictable. His laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine. I don't think that's possible. He walked me back to the guest wing, pausing at the threshold. The clinic I mentioned. Would you like to see it tomorrow? It might help you decide. I considered my options. Spending the day alone in this beautiful cage versus doing something useful. Seeing more of Nikolai's world. Yes, I would. Excellent. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face with exquisite gentleness. Sleep well, Emma. I stepped back, breaking the contact. Good night, Nikolai. Inside my rooms, I leaned against the closed door, heart racing inexplicably. The man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his occupation, and everything to do with how he looked at me. Like I was precious, fascinating, worth pursuing. No one had ever looked at me that way before. The next morning, I woke to find a note slipped under my door. Car will be ready at 9 a.m. Dress comfortably. And I chose my own clothes again. Dark jeans, a sweater, and boots, a small assertion of independence. When I descended the main staircase, Nikolai was waiting in the foyer, speaking quietly with two men I hadn't seen before. All three looked up at my approach. Emma, Nikolai greeted me, something warming in his expression. Sleep well? Better than expected, I admitted. The bed in the guest wing had been ridiculously comfortable. Good. He introduced the two men, Mikhail and Sergei, explaining they would be my security detail when I wasn't with him personally. Both nodded respectfully, their eyes professionally assessing without being invasive. The clinic was located in South Boston, housed in what looked like an ordinary medical office building. Inside, however, was a fully equipped facility with examination rooms, a small surgical suite, and a pharmacy. A middle-aged woman with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor was introduced as Dr. Ivanova. So you're the nurse Mr. Volkov has been talking about, she said, sizing me up with open curiosity. ER experience? 3 years at St. Mary's, I confirmed. She nodded approvingly. We could use someone with trauma experience. Most of what we see is routine. Checkups, vaccinations, minor injuries. But occasionally we get something more serious. Ivanova showed me around the clinic, explaining their patient population. Primarily Russian immigrants, family members of Nikolai's associates, and others who needed medical care without questions or documentation. The facility was surprisingly well equipped and scrupulously clean. We operate 3 days a week, she explained. Sometimes more if there's an emergency. What happens during emergencies now? I asked. Dr. Ivanova's expression turned grim. We do what we can. Call in favors from doctors who owe Mr. Volkov. It's not ideal. I examined the surgical suite, noting the modern equipment and well-stocked supply cabinets. This is impressive. Mr. Volkov doesn't do things halfway. She replied with a knowing look. I was surprised to find myself considering the opportunity seriously. The work would be meaningful, the facility well-equipped. It wasn't what I had trained for, working for a criminal enterprise. But the patients themselves would be innocent people in need. After the tour, Nikolai was waiting in what served as an administrative office. What do you think? It's not what I expected, I admitted. It's actually impressive. Satisfaction flickered across his features. Does that mean you'll consider working here? I'm still thinking about it, I said cautiously. He nodded, accepting this without pressure. Hungry? There's a restaurant nearby that serves excellent borscht. The restaurant turned out to be a small, unassuming Russian place, tucked between a laundromat and a convenience store. The owner greeted Nikolai with obvious deference, leading us to a private corner booth. Mikhail and Sergei took up positions near the door, maintaining a respectful distance while keeping watch. "Do you trust my recommendation?" Nikolai asked after we were seated. "For food? I suppose." He ordered for both of us in rapid Russian, the owner nodding enthusiastically before hurrying away. When we were alone, Nikolai leaned back, studying me with undisguised interest. "What did you really think of the clinic?" I considered my answer carefully. "It's doing good work for people who need it. But I'm uncomfortable with where the funding comes from." Rather than being offended, he seemed to appreciate my honesty. "The world isn't black and white, Emma. My organization provides security, employment, and protection for hundreds of families. Yes, some of our activities fall outside the law, but not all laws are just. That's a convenient rationalization," I pointed out, but not an untrue one. He leaned forward. "The clinic helps people who would otherwise suffer. Does it matter where the money comes from if the outcome is positive? Intent matters," I insisted. "Means matter, not just ends." His smile was appreciative rather than mocking. A moral philosopher as well as a healer. "You continue to fascinate me, Emma Sullivan." The food arrived, hearty borscht with sour cream, followed by beef stroganoff that melted in my mouth. We ate in companionable silence for a while, before Nikolai spoke again. "I have business to attend to this afternoon," he said. "Would you like to return to the house, or is there somewhere else you'd prefer to go?" The unexpected freedom of choice caught me off guard. I'd like to visit the Boston Public Library, actually. I've been meaning to go for months. If my request surprised him, he didn't show it. "Of course. Mikhail and Sergei will accompany you. Take as long as you like." The library visit was surreal. Browsing ancient manuscripts and rare books while two intimidating men in dark suits maintained a discreet perimeter around me. Yet I found myself relaxing into the strange new normal of my life. Even exchanging a few words with Sergei about a Russian novel I'd noticed on the shelves in Nikolai's house. When we returned to the townhouse late that afternoon, Mrs. Petrov informed me that Nikolai would be occupied with business until late, and had asked to reschedule our dinner for the following night. A strange mix of disappointment and relief washed over me. Relief at having space to process the day's experiences, disappointment at not seeing him again. I spent the evening exploring the books in my sitting room, finally falling asleep in the window seat, with a volume of Russian poetry in my lap. I woke disoriented, sometime after midnight, to find a soft blanket draped over me that hadn't been there before. On the table beside me sat a glass of water and another of Nikolai's handwritten notes. "Sweet dreams, Emma. I look forward to continuing our conversations tomorrow. N." The realization that he had been in the room while I slept should have disturbed me more than it did. Instead, I found myself tracing his handwriting with my fingertips, wondering about the man behind the careful script. A man capable of violence and tenderness in equal measure, a contradiction I was increasingly drawn to despite my better judgment. Days blended into one another as I settled into an unexpected rhythm in Nikolai's world. I began working at the clinic 3 mornings a week, finding purpose in helping patients who had nowhere else to turn. Dr. Ivanova proved to be a demanding but fair mentor, her brusque manner hiding genuine care for those she treated. Most patients spoke limited English, but gratitude transcends language barriers. I saw it in their eyes, in tentative smiles, in the gentle press of weathered hands against mine. Nikolai kept his distance during my work hours, though I felt his invisible presence everywhere. In the respect shown to me by his men, in the state-of-the-art equipment at the clinic, in the way doors opened before I reached them. We dined together most evenings, conversations flowing more easily as initial wariness gave way to cautious familiarity. I learned that Nikolai spoke 5 languages fluently, preferred Dostoevsky to Tolstoy, and could discuss Renaissance art with surprising knowledge. He'd traveled extensively, but considered Boston home, had never married, and harbored a secret sweet tooth that Mrs. Petrov indulged with homemade pastries. Small details that humanized him, making it increasingly difficult to maintain emotional distance. 1 week into my stay, I returned from the clinic to find Nikolai waiting in the foyer, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "What's wrong?" I asked, handing my coat to Mrs. Petrov. "Nothing that need concern you." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have to go out of town overnight. Business in New York. Mikhail and Sergei will remain here, and the house security will be doubled. Concern flickered through me, surprising in its intensity. Is it dangerous, this business? Something softened in his expression. Are you worried for me, Emma? I'd prefer not to have wasted my medical skills saving someone who gets himself killed a week later. I deflected, not ready to examine the true nature of my concern. His laugh was genuine, breaking through the tension. I'll bear that in mind. I've left something for you in the library. Second shelf from the fireplace. It might interest you. After he departed, curiosity drew me to the library. On the specified shelf, I found a first-edition collection of Florence Nightingale's notes on nursing, its leather binding worn but lovingly preserved. Inside was another of Nikolai's notes. For the healer who saved a stranger in the darkness. Your compassion is a light few possess. N. I traced the inscription, a warm ache spreading beneath my ribs. How had this man, this dangerous, complicated man, come to understand me so well in so short a time? That night, I dreamed of Nikolai. Not the polished, controlled man who hosted me at dinner, but the wounded figure from the alley, vulnerable, human, his blood warm on my fingers as I worked to save him. In the dream, he pulled me closer instead of warning me away, his lips brushing my ear as he whispered words I couldn't understand, but somehow knew were important. I woke tangled in silk sheets, heart racing, the phantom sensation of his touch lingering on my skin. Outside, dawn had barely broken, the sky a watercolor wash of pink and gold. Sleep eluded me after that, my thoughts too tangled with conflicting emotions, wariness warring with growing attraction, practical concerns about my future colliding with the intoxicating present. Later that morning, I was reading in the courtyard when Mrs. Petrov approached, her normally impassive face tight with concern. "Miss Sullivan," she said, her voice lower than usual. "You have a visitor." "A visitor?" I set my book aside. "Who?" "A Detective Collins from Boston PD." Her eyes conveyed a warning. "He's asking about the night Mr. Volkov was injured." My pulse quickened. "Does Nikolai know?" "Mr. Volkov is still in New York. I've informed Anton, who's on his way." She hesitated. "The detective was insistent about speaking with you specifically." I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "Show him in." Detective Collins was a weathered man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a deliberate manner. He declined Mrs. Petrov's offer of refreshments, his gaze sweeping the courtyard before settling on me with calculated intensity. "Miss Sullivan," he began after introducing himself. "Interesting place you're staying. I'm house-sitting for a friend," I replied smoothly, the lie coming easier than expected. "What can I help you with, detective?" He smiled without warmth, just following up on a report of gunshots in North End last week. Multiple witnesses saw a woman matching your description near the scene. "I work night shifts at St. Mary's," I said. "I often walk home through North End." "On the night in question, you were seen speaking with a man who appeared to be injured. This man then left in a black vehicle." He watched me closely. "Did you provide medical assistance to someone that night, Ms. Sullivan?" I kept my expression neutral. "As a nurse, I help people all the time, detective. You'll have to be more specific. Let me be direct." His voice hardened. "We found blood evidence and shell casings in that alley, along with 2 bodies. Professional hits. The blood types didn't match the victims, which suggests a third party was injured, but escaped. We're trying to identify that individual." My mind raced. 2 bodies. Nikolai hadn't mentioned killing anyone that night. But he'd been wounded, defending himself. The men had clearly meant to kill him. "I'm sorry, detective, but I can't help you." I held his gaze steadily. If I witnessed anything unusual that night, I would have reported it. "Would you?" He leaned forward. "Even if the injured party was Nikolai Volkov, head of Boston's Russian syndicate?" The direct naming of Nikolai sent ice through my veins, but I maintained my composure. "I don't know who that is." Collins laughed without humor. "Then you might want to ask your friend why his house is registered to Volkov Enterprises." He withdrew a business card, placing it on the table between us. "When you decide you'd rather not be an accessory to murder, give me a call." After he left, I remained frozen in my seat, the business card untouched. Anton appeared minutes later, his normally calm demeanor disturbed. "Ms. Sullivan," he said urgently. What did the detective want? I related the conversation, watching Anton's face grow increasingly grim. I need to contact Mr. Volkov immediately, he said when I finished. Please remain in the house until he returns. Anton? I called as he turned to leave. Were there really 2 bodies in that alley? He paused, his expression unreadable. Mr. Volkov was ambushed by 4 men. 2 escaped. And he didn't think to mention this when he told me what happened? He protects you from certain realities, Anton said carefully. Not all knowledge is beneficial, Ms. Sullivan. After he left, I paced my room, thoughts churning. I'd known intellectually what Nikolai was, what his organization did, but the detective's visit had shattered the comfortable bubble I'd been living in, forcing me to confront the stark reality. I was harbored by a man responsible for deaths, however justified he might consider them. Nikolai returned earlier than expected, arriving that evening in a flurry of activity. I heard raised voices downstairs, orders being issued in rapid Russian. When he finally came to my door, his face was a controlled mask, only his eyes betraying the tension he carried. Emma, he said, his voice gentle despite everything else. Are you all right? Am I all right? I repeated incredulously. A detective showed up asking about bodies in an alley, Nikolai. Bodies you never mentioned. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I didn't want to burden you with those details. Burden me? I stood my ground as he moved closer. Or protect yourself. Both, he admitted, surprising me with his honesty. Would it have changed your decision to help me if you'd known I'd killed those men? The question hung between us, weighted with implications. They were trying to kill you, I said finally. I understand self-defense. Relief flickered across his features. The detective, Collins, he's been investigating my organization for years. This is the closest he's come to connecting me directly to anything because of me, I realized aloud. Nikolai nodded grimly, which is why we need to be more careful now. I've arranged for a different security team for the clinic. Mikhail and Sergei are too recognizable as my men. Is that all you're worried about? I asked, disbelief coloring my tone. Your security arrangements? He closed the distance between us, his hands coming up to frame my face with surprising gentleness. No, Emma, I'm worried about you. About what happens when you realize exactly what kind of man I am and decide you want nothing more to do with me. The raw vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. His thumbs traced my cheekbones, his dark eyes searching mine. I've tried to keep the darker aspects of my world away from you. Perhaps that was a mistake. I'm not naive, Nikolai. I know what you do. Do you? He stepped back, creating distance between us. I've killed men, Emma. Not just those in the alley. I've ordered others killed. I control gambling, protection rackets, smuggling operations across the Northeast. The clinic you admire? Funded by activities you would find reprehensible. His brutal honesty left me speechless. This was the reality I'd been avoiding since the moment I stepped into that alley. The truth behind the elegant man who quoted Dostoevsky over dinner. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Because Collins won't stop, Nikolai said quietly. He'll dig until he finds enough to arrest you as an accessory. The only way to protect you may be to send you away. Far from Boston. Far from me. Send me away? The prospect shouldn't have filled me with the dread it did. What happened to 2 weeks? That was before Collins connected you to me. His expression darkened. The detective is the least of our concerns. If my enemies learn of your importance to me... Importance? I seized on the word. What exactly am I to you, Nikolai? A debt to be repaid? A novelty? What? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. In 2 strides he was before me again, one hand sliding into my hair, the other at the small of my back, pulling me against him. You want to know what you are to me, Emma Sullivan. His voice dropped to a whisper. You're the first pure thing I've touched in years. The first person who's looked at me, really looked, and still didn't run. You're the woman I think about when I should be focusing on business, the one whose safety occupies my thoughts when I should be planning strategy. My heart thundered in my chest, his proximity overwhelming my senses. I should push him away. should be repulsed by his confessions of violence and criminality. Instead, I found myself drawn closer to the flame, moth-like, knowing the danger but unable to resist. "That doesn't answer my question," I whispered. "Doesn't it?" His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "You've become essential to me, Emma, in ways I never anticipated and still don't fully understand." Before I could respond, his lips found mine, tentative at first, then with growing hunger when I didn't pull away. Heat bloomed in my chest, spreading outward as I surrendered to the kiss, my hands clutching the front of his shirt. He tasted of coffee, and something uniquely him, intoxicating and dangerous. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, reality came crashing back. I stepped away, putting distance between us, my fingertips touching my lips in disbelief at my own actions. "This can't happen," I said, my voice unsteady. "It already is happening." Nikolai remained where he stood, giving me space despite the desire evident in his eyes. "But you're right. The timing is problematic. An understatement of massive proportions. Nikolai, a detective is investigating you for murder, and I'm potentially an accessory. Your enemies are still out there. This is insanity. Life rarely waits for convenient timing, Emma." A smile touched his lips, sad but genuine, especially for men in my position. The reality of his world, our world now, hung heavy between us. A criminal empire, enemies, violence, death. And yet, I couldn't deny the connection that had formed, inappropriate and dangerous as it might be. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. "Now," Nikolai said, regaining his composure. "We have dinner, and I tell you exactly what we're going to do about Detective Collins and the Providence problem. No more sheltering you from the truth. You deserve better than that." Over dinner in the courtyard, Nikolai laid out the situation with clinical precision. The Providence organization had been making strategic moves into Boston for months, targeting his operations one by one. The ambush in the alley had been their boldest move yet, an assassination attempt orchestrated with inside help from a trusted lieutenant who had since been removed. "Collins isn't actually after you," Nikolai explained. "You're a means to an end, getting to me. He's been building a case for years, but without concrete evidence, he can't move against me directly. And now I'm that concrete evidence," I said grimly. "Potentially," Nikolai agreed, "but only if you cooperate with him. You want me to obstruct justice, lie to the police?" Nikolai's expression remained neutral. "I want you to protect yourself. Anything you tell Collins will implicate you as much as me." He was right. And that realization settled in my stomach like a stone. I had crossed a line the moment I treated Nikolai without reporting the gunshot wound. Every day since had only entangled me further. "So I say nothing," I concluded. "For now." Nikolai took a sip of his wine. "Meanwhile, I'll accelerate our plans regarding Providence." "What plans?" A cold smile touched his lips. "Better you don't have those details, Emma. Some knowledge is still dangerous to possess." After dinner, Nikolai walked me back to my rooms, pausing at the threshold. The tension from our earlier kiss remained, crackling in the air between us. "Emma," he said softly, "whatever happens in the coming days, know that my priority is your safety. If I ask you to leave, to go far away, I need you to trust that it's for the best. And if I refuse?" His expression grew serious. "Don't. Please. I've lost too many people I care about already." He left before I could respond, the echo of his words following me into restless dreams where gunshots and kisses blurred together in confusing harmony. The next 3 days passed in tense anticipation. I continued working at the clinic, now accompanied by 2 new security men who blended better with the South Boston landscape. Nikolai was frequently absent, returning late with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. Our conversations became briefer, though no less intense, as if we were both aware of a clock ticking down to some inevitable conclusion. On the 4th day, everything changed. I was organizing supplies at the clinic when Dr. Ivanova rushed in, her normally composed demeanor shattered. "We need to prepare," she said urgently. "Multiple gunshot victims incoming. Providence made their move." "Providence?" My blood ran cold. Nikolai is alive, she confirmed, already pulling out trauma kits. But several of his men were hit. They'll be here in 5 minutes. The next hours passed in a blur of blood and urgent action. 4 men with various gunshot wounds arrived in quick succession, carried in by grim-faced associates. Dr. Ivanova and I worked seamlessly together, triaging and treating, stabilizing what we could. 1 man died despite our efforts, a bullet having nicked his femoral artery before his colleagues could apply adequate pressure. I was elbow-deep in the chest cavity of another, helping Dr. Ivanova extract a bullet lodged dangerously close to his lung, when Nikolai finally appeared. Blood spattered his shirt, not his own, I assessed with quick medical detachment. His eyes found mine across the room, something primal and possessive flaring in their depths when he saw me working to save his man. When the immediate crises had been stabilized, he pulled me aside into the small administrative office, closing the door behind us. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands running over my shoulders, down my arms, checking for injuries despite the fact that the blood covering my scrubs clearly belonged to others. "I'm fine," I assured him, catching his hands to still their frantic movement. "Nikolai, what happened?" His jaw tightened. Providence made their move, as we expected. But we were ready. A cold satisfaction flickered across his features. Their leadership has been eliminated. The clinical euphemism didn't disguise the reality. More deaths, more violence. Yet I couldn't summon the horror I should have felt. These were men who had tried to kill Nikolai, who would have killed me without hesitation to get to him. "It's over?" I asked. "Almost." He squeezed my hands. "There's cleanup to be done. Collins will be looking for connections. You need to return to the house and pack." "Pack?" Alarm shot through me. "You're sending me away?" Nikolai's expression softened. "Just temporarily. A week, maybe 2, until the heat dies down. I have a house in Vermont. Remote. Secure. You'll be comfortable there. And what about you?" "I'll join you when it's safe." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. "When we can start something without all this hanging over us. Start something." The implication hung between us. Fragile and new. Something beyond debt. Beyond protection. Something I'd been reluctant to name even in the privacy of my own thoughts. "This is the last time I run, Nikolai," I said firmly. "I can't build a life in hiding. I'm not asking you to." He stepped closer, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. "I'm asking for time to make it safe for you to stay. Can you give me that?" In that moment, covered in the blood of his men, standing in a clinic funded by his criminal empire, I should have felt revulsion. Instead, I felt a terrible clarity. I had crossed a line, chosen a side, become part of Nikolai's world in ways I couldn't undo. "Yes," I whispered. "I can give you that." He pressed his forehead to mine, a gesture of unexpected tenderness. 2 weeks. Then we'll figure out what comes next, together. The Vermont house was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd pictured another fortress, heavily guarded and isolated. Instead, I found myself in a charming timber frame cottage nestled among pine trees, overlooking a small, private lake. The nearest neighbor was miles away, but the isolation felt peaceful rather than threatening. 2 security men, Dmitri and Pavel, maintained a discreet presence in a separate guest house, giving me the illusion of solitude while ensuring my protection. Inside, the cottage was a study in rustic comfort. Stone fireplace, plush furniture, walls lined with books and vintage photographs of the surrounding wilderness. No opulence here, just thoughtful simplicity. It felt more genuinely Nikolai than the Boston townhouse had. A place where he could shed the trappings of his position and simply exist. I spent my first days exploring the surrounding woods, wrapped in the heavy coat Nikolai had insisted I take. October in Vermont painted the landscape in fiery oranges and golds, a stark contrast to Boston's urban palette. At night, I built fires in the massive stone hearth and read from Nikolai's eclectic library, trying not to count the hours until he might join me. Daily calls from Nikolai were my only connection to the outside world. He spoke carefully, avoiding specifics about the cleanup in Boston, focusing instead on when he might join me. The caution in his voice told me more than his words. Collins was still a threat, the Providence situation more complex than he'd let on. On the 5th night, I was awakened by the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. I peered through the window to see a familiar black Escalade, my heart leaping before reason could temper it. Dmitri emerged from the guest house, weapon visible at his side as he approached the vehicle. Only when he recognized the driver did he step back, nodding toward the main house. I was waiting in the doorway when Nikolai climbed the porch steps, exhaustion evident in the set of his shoulders. He stopped when he saw me, drinking in my appearance as if committing it to memory, hair tousled from sleep, wrapped in one of his sweaters I'd claimed as my own, feet bare despite the autumn chill. "Emma," he said, my name carrying a wealth of unspoken emotion. Then he was crossing the threshold, gathering me into his arms with a desperation that stole my breath. I clung to him, breathing in his familiar scent mixed with the cold night air, feeling the tension in his body gradually release as he held me. "I didn't expect you for days," I said when we finally pulled apart. I couldn't stay away. His eyes, usually so carefully guarded, revealed a vulnerability that made my chest ache. "The house felt empty without you." He followed me into the living room, where embers still glowed in the fireplace. I added logs while he shed his coat, revealing a holstered gun that he removed and placed on a high shelf, out of reach but accessible if needed. The reminder of his dangerous life landed like a stone in my stomach. "What's happened in Boston?" I asked, curling into the corner of the sofa as he poured himself a measure of whiskey from a crystal decanter. Nikolai sat heavily beside me, fatigue etched in the lines of his face. "Collins is still investigating, but the evidence from the alley has mysteriously disappeared from police custody. Without it, he has nothing connecting either of us to the scene. And Providence? Their leadership has been replaced." His voice took on the cold edge I'd come to recognize when he discussed business. "Those who remain have accepted new terms. Boston is secure for the foreseeable future." "At what cost?" I asked quietly. His eyes met mine, unflinching. "A necessary one." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of unspoken realities between us. I had known what Nikolai was from the beginning, had glimpsed the ruthlessness beneath the cultured exterior in that alley. Yet the man before me now, exhausted from protecting what was his, stirred emotions I could no longer deny. "You should rest," I said finally, reaching out to touch his face, my fingers tracing the stubble along his jaw. "You look exhausted." He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. "I've missed you, Emma. More than I thought possible." "I've missed you too," I admitted, the truth easier to voice here, away from Boston and the complications of our normal lives. His eyes darkened, thumb tracing circles on my wrist. "We should talk about what happens next. About us, tomorrow," I said, standing and drawing him up with me. "Tonight, you need sleep." I led him to the master bedroom, where a king-sized bed dominated the space. Without speaking, I helped him undress, my nurse's efficiency giving way to something more intimate as I unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the lean musculature beneath and the scar along his side, my handiwork, the mark that had bound our fates together. He caught my hand as I traced the healed wound. "Stay," he whispered, a request rather than a demand. I should have hesitated, should have maintained the last fragile boundary between us. Instead, I nodded, slipping under the covers beside him. He gathered me against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, one hand stroking my hair in gentle rhythms until his breathing deepened into sleep. I lay awake longer, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness outside and the familiar cadence of Nikolai's breathing, thinking about how completely my life had changed in less than 2 weeks. I had gone from an isolated existence of work and empty apartment to being embraced by a world of danger and luxury, violence and protection. More significantly, I had gone from emotional solitude to being claimed, desired, valued by a man whose very nature should have repelled me. Yet here I lay, curled against him, unable to imagine returning to my former life. I woke to sunlight filtering through pine branches outside the window, and Nikolai watching me, his expression unguarded in the early morning light. We had shifted in sleep, my back to his chest, his arm draped protectively over my waist. "You're staring," I murmured, voice rough with sleep. "I'm appreciating," he corrected, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "I half expected you to be a dream." I turned to face him, our noses almost touching on the shared pillow. Not a dream, though sometimes this feels like one, or a nightmare, depending on the day. His expression sobered. Which is it today? Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. The kiss deepened immediately, weeks of tension and restraint dissolving like morning mist. His hands tangled in my hair, body shifting to cover mine, the weight of him both thrilling and grounding. "Emma?" He breathed against my lips, a question in her name. "Yes," I answered, arching into him. "Yes, Nikolai." What followed was both revelation and recognition, as if our bodies had known each other before our minds acknowledged the connection. His touch was reverent yet possessive, claiming me with a thoroughness that left no doubt about his feelings. I matched his intensity, marking his skin with my nails, claiming him in return. After, as sunlight climbed higher in the sky, we lay tangled together, my head on his chest while his fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare back. "I've never brought anyone here before," he said quietly. "This place has always been just mine, my escape." I raised my head to look at him. "Why bring me then?" "Because you've become essential, Emma." His dark eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "Because the thought of you not being in my life is unacceptable." "I'm not sure that's a healthy perspective," I said, though my heart raced at his words. A smile touched his lips. "Probably not. But it's the truth." His expression grew serious again. "Which brings us to what happens next." I sat up, pulling the sheet around me as I faced him. "You said 2 weeks. It's been less than 1. Plans change." Nikolai propped himself up on his elbows. "Collins is more persistent than anticipated. He's been questioning everyone connected to the clinic, looking for links to me." Alarm shot through me. "Dr. Ivanova is well protected," he assured me. "But the scrutiny makes your return to Boston complicated. At least for now. So, what are you suggesting? That I stay here indefinitely, become a hermit in Vermont while you run your empire in Boston?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "That's not a life, Nikolai. That's exile." He sat up fully, taking my hands in his. "I'm suggesting alternatives. I have properties in other cities, New York, Miami, Chicago. Places where you could build a new life with less scrutiny. I would visit as often as business allows." "A kept woman," I said flatly. "Living on your money in your houses, waiting for you to find time for me between criminal enterprises." Anger flashed in his eyes. "That's not what I'm offering, and you know it." "Then what are you offering?" "Because I won't live in hiding, Nikolai. I won't give up my career, my independence, to be an accessory in your life." He released my hands, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. "What would you have me do, Emma? Abandon everything I've built? The organization doesn't just disappear if I walk away. Hundreds of people depend on me. Families, communities." "I'm not asking you to abandon anything," I said more gently. "I'm asking for honesty about what's possible between us. About whether there's a future where I'm more than a complication you need to protect." Nikolai's expression softened. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising tenderness. "You've never been just a complication, Emma. From the moment you walked into that alley, you've been..." He paused, searching for words. "A light I didn't know I was seeking." The raw emotion in his voice stole my breath. "Then help me find a way forward," I whispered. "One where we both get to live, not just exist." He was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "There may be a way," he said finally, "but it would require patience and trust." "I'm listening." "I've been considering a shift in our operations for some time," he explained. "Moving away from certain, less legitimate enterprises toward those that can operate in the open. Real estate development, import, export of legal goods. The clinic could become a proper community health center." Hope flickered in my chest. "A legitimate business empire." "It wouldn't happen overnight," he cautioned. "And some aspects of what we do will always operate in gray areas. But yes, a transition toward legitimacy, one that would eventually allow us both to live more conventionally." "How long?" I asked. "A year, maybe 2, to make significant progress." His eyes held mine, serious and intent. "During that time, You could establish yourself elsewhere. Perhaps with one of the hospital systems I have connections with in Providence or Hartford, close enough to see each other regularly, far enough to avoid Collins's scrutiny. It wasn't perfect. It meant more separation, more waiting. But it also offered a path forward, a potential future where Nikolai and I could build something real together, without constant threats hanging over us. You'd really do that? I asked. Change your entire business model? For you? He smiled, a genuine warmth that transformed his features. I've been considering it anyway. The world is changing, Emma. Old methods aren't as viable as they once were. You're simply providing additional motivation to accelerate plans already in motion. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his. 2 years, I said, with regular visits, and complete honesty between us. No more sheltering me from certain realities. Agreed, he said, his arms encircling me, though I reserve the right to protect you from physical danger, as long as I reserve the right to make my own decisions about acceptable risks. I pulled back to look at him. I'm not fragile, Nikolai. I don't need to be kept in a gilded cage. No, he agreed, his eyes warm with admiration. You're the woman who walks into alleys to save strangers. Fragile is the last word I'd use to describe you. We sealed our agreement with a kiss that felt like a promise, of challenges ahead, but also of unwavering commitment to finding our way through them together. The next week passed in a bubble of temporary peace, walks around the lake, evenings by the fire, nights wrapped in each other's arms. We talked endlessly, planning our separate but connected futures. Imagining the day when separation would no longer be necessary, Nikolai made calls daily, setting pieces in motion for the transformation of his organization, while I researched hospitals in Hartford that might benefit from an experienced trauma nurse. Reality intruded eventually, as it always must. A call from Anton brought news that Collins had obtained a warrant to search the clinic. It was time for Nikolai to return to Boston. Come with me, he said, as we stood beside his Escalade on our last morning together, just to pack your things. Then Anton will drive you to Hartford to look at apartments. Is it safe? I asked, searching his face for the truth. I wouldn't suggest it otherwise. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Collins has nothing concrete. The warrant is a fishing expedition. I nodded, making my decision. I'll come, but only to say goodbye to the clinic staff and get my things. Then Hartford. The drive back to Boston was tense but not uncomfortable, filled with practical discussions about my new position at Hartford Memorial, secured through Nikolai's connections, and the apartment he'd arranged for me there, in a building coincidentally owned by one of his legitimate real estate ventures. The townhouse when we arrived felt different, less a prison, more a waypoint in our journey. Mrs. Petrov greeted me with unexpected warmth, whispering in Russian what I assumed were good wishes as she helped me gather my belongings. The clinic staff would like to see you before you leave, Nikolai said over dinner our last night in Boston. Dr. Ivanova has organized a small gathering tomorrow morning. I'd like that, I said, touched by the gesture. I'll miss them. They'll miss you too. He reached across the table, taking my hand. As will I. It's not forever, I reminded him. Hartford is less than 2 hours away. Still too far. His thumb traced circles on my palm. But necessary, for now. The goodbye gathering at the clinic the next morning was more emotional than I'd anticipated. Dr. Ivanova presented me with a vintage medical bag, its leather worn but beautiful. For the healer who goes where she is needed, she said, embracing me with surprising affection. The other staff and even some patients had brought small gifts and cards, their gratitude overwhelming me. As we prepared to leave, Anton approached Nikolai, murmuring something in his ear that made him stiffen. Take Emma to the car, he directed, his expression closing into the mask of the businessman. I'll be out shortly. What's wrong? I asked once we were alone in the back seat of the waiting Rolls-Royce. Collins, Anton replied grimly, watching the clinic entrance. He just arrived with a warrant. Mr. Volkov is handling it. Anxiety twisted in my stomach. Should we leave? What if he wants to question me? Mr. Volkov's lawyers will ensure that doesn't happen, Anton assured me. 15 tense minutes later, Nikolai emerged from the clinic, his face impassive. Detective Collins followed, frustration evident in his rigid posture. Their eyes met across the parking lot, a silent communication of mutual enmity before Collins turned back toward his unmarked police car. "Everything all right?" I asked when Nikolai slid into the back seat beside me. "Perfect timing on our departure," he said, taking my hand. "Collins has nothing but suspicions. By the time he finds another angle, you'll be established in Hartford, and I'll have accelerated our transition plans." Anton drove us to the Hartford apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom with views of the Connecticut River, already furnished with a tasteful blend of modern pieces and antiques. Nikolai walked through with me, pointing out security features and the pre-programmed numbers in the new phone he'd provided. "This one," he said, showing me a contact listed simply as N, "will always reach me, regardless of where I am, day or night." "I can't believe this is happening," I said, looking around at what would be my new home. "A month ago I was just an ER nurse working nights. And now?" Nikolai asked, pulling me into his arms. I considered the question, weighing everything that had changed. "Now I'm still a nurse, but one with a complicated relationship with a man working to legitimize his criminal empire. Not exactly the future I imagined." "Disappointed?" His eyes searched mine. Surprisingly, no. I wrapped my arms around his neck, terrified sometimes, uncertain often, but not disappointed. His smile was slow and genuine. "That's a start." "It's more than a start," I corrected, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "It's a choice, my choice. Not made out of fear or obligation, but because despite everything, I want this. I want you." Nikolai's arms tightened around me, his kiss deepening with a possessiveness that sent heat through my veins. When we broke apart, both breathing heavily, his eyes were dark with promise. 2 years, he said, forehead resting against mine, to build something legitimate, something lasting, something worthy of you. I'll hold you to that, I whispered. He stayed that night, both of us knowing it might be weeks before we could be together again. In the gray light of dawn, I walked him to the door, already feeling the weight of separation. "I've arranged for a car to take you to the hospital Monday for orientation," he said, cupping my face in his hands. "The building has security, but I've also assigned a man to watch the entrance, discreetly. Nikolai, just until we're certain Collins has moved on," he insisted. "Please, Emma, let me do this much." I nodded, understanding this was the compromise our relationship would require, his need to protect balanced against my need for independence. 2 weeks, he promised, kissing me one last time. "I'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll have dinner at that Italian place down the street." "I'll hold you to that too," I said, forcing a smile despite the ache in my chest. After he left, I stood at the window watching his car pull away, already counting the days until his return. The future stretching before us was uncertain, filled with challenges and compromises, the shadow of his past always lurking. But as I turned back to the apartment, my apartment, I felt something I hadn't expected: hope. Not the naive hope of fairy tales and perfect endings, but the realistic hope of 2 people committed to finding a way forward together, despite the odds. Nikolai was right. I had stepped into his world the moment I entered that alley, but he had also stepped into mine, a world where healing mattered more than power, where compassion wasn't weakness, but strength. I unpacked my few belongings, placing the vintage medical bag Dr. Ivanova had given me on my new desk. Inside, I found one of Nikolai's handwritten notes tucked among the instruments, for the woman who saved more than my life. "The journey ahead is ours to create together. With all that I am, N." Outside my window, the Connecticut River flowed steadily toward the sea, a reminder that all things change, all things move forward. Even a nurse who saved a stranger from gunfire. Even a man whose power was built on fear, but whose heart was capable of love. I placed the note beside my bed and began to build my new life, one that would, in time, merge with Nikolai's into something neither of us could have imagined alone, something imperfect, but real, something ours,